Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. Coming up in today's show. Brazil's new president, Jair Bolsonaro, uses his stop in Davos to appeal to big business and push his far-right agenda. California Senator Kamala Harris launches her presidential campaign on Martin Luther King Day, one of many Democratic hopefuls to toss her hat into the 2020 ring. And the American remake of French hit The Intouchables comes out in the States. More on the success and controversy surrounding The Upside on the way. I'm Jeannie Godula. Brazil's new president, Jair Bolsonaro, was in Davos this week for the World Economic Forum. Speaking there, he outlined his vision for what he called the new Brazil, promising reform and trying to win over those more skeptical of his environmental agenda. The far-right politician has already made good on several of his campaign promises, including a bill loosening gun laws that would let what he called good Brazilians better defend themselves.
At the presidential palace in Brasilia, recent days have been action-packed. Jair Bolsonaro has signed a new decree, emblematic of his populist policy. Brazilians will now be allowed to own multiple firearms. It's the first major action of his new administration.
To ensure the right to legitimate self-defense, I, as president, will be using this weapon.
By signing the decree, Bolsonaro is keeping one of his flagship campaign promises. His other grand plan, as he says, is to clean the country of any socialist or communist ideology.
This is our flag. It will never be red.
Step one in this ideological purification, the firing of hundreds of government employees. Some in political posts, others simply administrative employees, all accused of opposing the president prior to his election.
There's a real witch hunt atmosphere in the ministries. We're going to have 4 years with a government that really doesn't take criticism well at all.
The crusade extends to the content of school books. These history teachers are alarmed. Bolsonaro wants to eliminate the curriculum's requirement to represent the ethnic diversity of the Brazilian people.
This is Brazil. Indigenous people are part of the Brazilian people. In Brazil, we have an LGBT community. All these images, he wants to throw them in the rubbish bin.
On the school book issue, Bolsonaro has been forced to back down. Due to widespread outcry, he's pulled the measure. It's the first retreat for a man who's assigned 7 army personnel to his cabinet and only 2 women. Another sensitive issue Bolsonaro is charging into: indigenous territories. These native Brazilians live in a protected area on the outskirts of Brasilia. For Jair Bolsonaro, they, like all tribes in the country, have too much land. He's made it his mission to stop them from getting more. The reserve these men live on is already being nibbled away at by the neighboring city. They are particularly vulnerable.
They say we're not producing enough and we're slowing down the country's economic development.
I'm very worried. Here we're strong because we've kept our land. But now, we might lose everything.
Landowners, however, are very pleased with the new policy direction. They're hoping to pick up protected territory so they can cultivate it. A high-stakes game of cowboys and Indians, and it's clear which side Jair Bolsonaro is on.
That's not the only big story out of the Americas this week. Venezuela's being rocked by a movement against the president, Nicolas Maduro. First, there was a failed mutiny by soldiers hoping to spark an uprising against him. Then people took to the streets to protest in a movement led by National Assembly President Juan Guaido. Many international leaders have already called Maduro's second-term presidency illegitimate, including U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who called the Venezuelan leader a dictator. And the death toll from the gasoline pipeline explosion in Mexico is now at close to 100. That explosion last Friday came as crowds rushed in to collect gasoline gushing from a pipeline that had been ruptured by suspected fuel thieves in the state of Hidalgo. Central Mexico had been hard hit by gasoline shortages since the president launched a crackdown on fuel theft nearly a month ago, ordering pipelines closed in an attempt to stop criminal activity. Let's go further north now to the United States, where the number of Democrats hoping to take on Donald Trump in 2020 is growing by the week. The field of potential presidential candidates is lining up to be the most diverse yet, and it already has the most women running in U.S. history. This week, California Senator Kamala Harris threw her hat into the ring. The civil rights advocate announced her candidacy on Martin Luther King Day, pledging to regain the trust of Americans. France 24's James Vicina has more now on the former hard-nosed prosecutor, who also has one of the most liberal voting records in the Senate.
The daughter of a Jamaican father and an Indian mother, Kamala Harris initially embarked on a career in law. After graduating from the University of California, Harris worked in San Francisco's attorney office before serving 2 terms as district attorney and then moving on to become the state's attorney general. It wasn't until 2016 that she entered the political arena, when she was elected senator for the state of California. Harris recently gained notoriety after fighting Justice Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court following allegations of sexual abuse. A vocal critic of Donald Trump, she called out the president's immigration policies as she confirmed her candidacy in a press conference on Monday.
I feel a sense of responsibility to stand up and fight for the best of who we are. He is now holding the American people hostage over a vanity project that he calls a wall, while 800,000 people are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent.
Harris is the 4th woman to declare her candidacy. With the primary election set to take place in 2020, she will be joining Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Miliband, as well as former Obama administration housing chief Julian Castro, in the race to clinch the Democratic nomination. With many more contenders expected to run, it's a fierce battle that lies ahead, almost 2 years before the country's general elections.
The Oscar nominations came out this week in Hollywood, honoring the best and the brightest in movie making. But it was a Mexican film that came out on top, with 10 nominations for Roma, directed by Alfonso Cuarón and screened on Oscar newcomer Netflix. Roma follows an indigenous live-in nanny, Cleo, who works for a white middle-class family in Mexico City in the 70s, and is largely based on the director's memory of his own childhood. The Spanish-language black-and-white film tied for most nominations, along with The Favorite, a royal period drama from Yorgos Lanthimos. Hollywood force Marvel also got its first Best Picture nomination for the blockbuster Black Panther. The winners will be announced at the 91st Academy Awards ceremony, February 24th. And in other movie news, the American remake of a huge French hit came out this week. It's called The Upside, and it's the remake of Intouchables or The Intouchables. The Upside has done surprisingly well at the box office, despite a mixed reception from critics and quite a bit of controversy. Peter O'Brien reports.
On dit non, on les met pas, on reste là.
Spot the difference.
C'est bon comme ça? Attends. Just relax. I am relaxed. This is me being relaxed.
A French comedy drama which became the highest-grossing movie ever in a language other than English has, more than 7 years later, been released as an American remake.
Penthouse.
The Upside was supposed to be distributed by the Weinstein Company last year, but was shelved and sold off following sexual abuse allegations against producer Harvey Weinstein.
I've been looking, trust me.
The film's stars have had problems too. Kevin Hart stepped down as this year's Oscars host over past homophobic tweets, and Bryan Cranston came under some criticism for playing the role of a disabled man. And now there's the mixed reviews. Critics praised the lead's performances but called the film preachy and cliché. Some were particularly scathing. One Room with a View said it was produced on the assumption that Americans don't read subtitles.
An easy paycheck for its 3 stars and an afterthought for those behind the camera, the upside is a blank non-entity, objectionable in its regard for race, class, disability, and good taste.
Which car is yours? All of these to the right.
Despite the press, audience feedback has been mostly positive. The upside's also done surprisingly well for sales, doubling industry expectations as it opened in North American cinemas.
Well, that's all the time we have for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week for all the news from north to south.
Tourné notamment ici à Hodeidah, théâtre d'une bataille acharnée de plusieurs mois. Retrouvez sur France 24 notre série de reportages exclusifs dans le nord du Yémen.
Don't miss this series of exclusive reports from northern Yemen on France 24 and France24.com.